You're standing in absolute darkness. The silk against your skin is the finest you've ever felt, yet it suffocates you. Somewhere beyond these walls, a king sits on a throne built from the bones of conquered nations. And tonight, he sent for you. You've been told since childhood that this moment would be an honor, that your purity was sacred, that the gods themselves smiled upon your selection. But as the footsteps echo closer down the marble corridor, you realize something your teachers never told you. Honor and horror often wear the same crown. This is the story of what Persian kings did to the virgins locked inside their palace walls. And I promise you, it's worse than anything you've imagined. The Achaemenid and later Persian dynasties didn't just build empires. They built systems. Systems designed to concentrate absolute power in the hands of one man, while convincing everyone else that servitude was salvation. At the heart of these systems was the royal harem, a sprawling labyrinth of chambers, gardens, and secrets buried deep within palace compounds. But this wasn't just a collection of wives and concubines. It was a factory, a production line where young girls were processed, refined, and ultimately consumed by royal appetites disguised as divine right. Let me take you inside. You were taken from your family when you were barely old enough to remember their faces. Maybe you were the daughter of a minor nobleman who needed to prove loyalty. Maybe your parents were conquered people, and you were tribute, living currency paid to avoid annihilation. Or maybe you were simply beautiful, and someone with power noticed. It doesn't matter how you arrived. What matters is that you'll never leave. They call this place the Anarun, the inner quarters, the forbidden zone where no unauthorized man can enter without facing execution. You're told this makes you special, protected, pure. You live with dozens of other girls in gilded chambers where sunlight filters through screens carved from cedar and ivory. Eunuchs guard every entrance, men who are castrated as boys to ensure your purity remains uncontaminated. They watch you dress. They watch you bathe. They watch you grow from child to woman, recording every change in your body like scribes documenting inventory. Your education begins immediately. You're taught to walk with perfect posture, balancing books and oil lamps on your head until your spine becomes a column of obedience. You learn 17 different ways to paint your eyes with coal and crushed gemstones. You memorize the king's favorite poems, his preferred perfumes, the exact temperature he likes his wine. You're taught music, how to play the lyre with fingers that must never tremble, even when your heart is racing. You learn dances that make your body move like water, like smoke, like something not quite human. And you're taught silence, the most important lesson of all. Silence when the older women return from the king's chambers with vacant eyes and torn silk. Silence when girls disappear and are never mentioned again. Silence when you hear screaming from the punishment cellars where disobedient flowers are retaught their place. The high priestess tells you that your virginity is your greatest gift, that you are vessels of sacred purity, chosen by the gods to serve their earthly representative. She describes your future with the king as a holy union, a moment when mortal and divine will merge through your flesh. But you notice something she never explains. If this is such an honor, why do you need guards to keep you from escaping? If you're so sacred, why are you never allowed to speak your own name in the king's presence? If this is divine will, why does it require so many locks? You're 15 now, maybe 16. The exact number has become blurry because time moves differently when you're trapped. The older women examine you with increasing frequency, checking your skin, your teeth, your breasts, evaluating you like merchants appraising silk before the market. Then one morning, you're moved to a different chamber. This room is smaller, more luxurious. The walls are painted with scenes of gods coupling with mortals, images you're supposed to find romantic, but instead feel like warnings. An elaborate bath dominates the center, filled with milk and honey and oils imported from lands you'll never see. The preparation begins. They submerge you in the bath, scrubbing every inch of your skin with crushed pearls and volcanic sand until you're raw and bleeding in places. They tell you this removes impurities, that the king cannot touch anything less than perfection. They shave your body completely, Every hair removed, every natural texture erased, until you're smooth as polished marble. You become a living statue, something crafted rather than born. The perfume comes next. Not the pleasant scents you've worn before, but something overwhelming, almost nauseating in its intensity. They soak your skin in myrrh and frankincense and ambergris for 12 hours. Then they repeat the process with different oils. Then again. This continues for 6 months. 6 months of being dissolved in fragrances, your own scent systematically erased until you smell like property, like something that belongs to someone else. You're not allowed to eat foods that might change your odor. No garlic, no strong spices. Your diet becomes bland, controlled, designed to turn your body into a neutral vessel ready to be flavored by the king's preferences. During these months, you're taught the real lessons. How to endure pain without crying out. How to fake pleasure convincingly. How to disappear inside yourself while your body performs whatever is demanded of it. The older women demonstrate techniques with a clinical detachment that's somehow more disturbing than if they'd shown emotion. They teach you about the king's moods. When he's been drinking, you must be more energetic, more entertaining. When he's angry from political setbacks, you must be perfectly submissive, a receptacle for rage disguised as passion. When he's bored, you must become whatever fantasy he's currently obsessing over. A foreign princess, a goddess, a virgin sacrifice. That last one isn't metaphorical. You learn about the rituals, the ones they don't mention during the beautiful speeches about sacred duty. Some kings believed that deflowering a virgin transferred her life force to them. That taking innocence literally fed their power, extending their reign and their vitality. These kings collected virgins like other men collected coins, each one a mystical transaction disguised as sexuality. But you're not supposed to know this. You're supposed to believe in the romance of it all, even as they teach you to check if your food has been poisoned, because other girls will kill you to take your place, and the eunuchs running this operation consider that healthy competition. The kingdom outside these walls spans from Egypt to India. Millions of subjects worship this king as the chosen of Ahura Mazda, the representative of cosmic order. They carve his victories into mountains. They name their children after him. They genuinely believe he's semi-divine. Differently. He's a man who requires dozens of people to prepare one girl for his bed. A man whose power is so fragile it requires absolute control over every woman who might glimpse his humanity. A man who frames his appetites as a religious obligation because even he can't face what he's really doing. The night finally comes. They dress you in translucent silks dyed purple with crushed murex shells, each thread worth more than your family earned in a lifetime. They hang you with jewelry so heavy you can barely move. Gold chains connect nose rings to ear cuffs to forehead pieces, literally binding your face into an expression of serene submission. The chief eunuch leads you through corridors you've never seen before. The deeper you go, the more the palace reveals its true nature. The beautiful facades give way to stone and shadow. You pass chambers where sounds you can't quite identify echo through heavy doors. You see stains on ancient marble that no amount of cleaning has erased. You're not being led to a bedroom. You're being delivered to an altar. The king's private chamber is overwhelming, not because of its beauty, though it's staggeringly ornate, but because of its isolation. This room exists in a space beyond law, beyond morality, beyond any authority except his will. What happens here might as well happen on another plane of existence for all the accountability it carries. He's waiting, and he's not alone. This is where the carefully maintained illusion shatters completely. You expected privacy. You expected something that could at least pretend to be intimate. Instead, there are witnesses, priests who will verify the king's virility, court officials who record the encounter for bureaucratic purposes, astrologers who observe to determine if the union is cosmically favorable. Your body isn't your own. It's a public event masquerading as a private act. The king approaches, and you're struck by his ordinariness. He's not the godlike figure from official portraits. He's just a man, aging, insecure, performing power because he knows that without these rituals, without this absolute dominance, someone might notice he's mortal. He doesn't speak to you. You're not a person to him. You're a function, like the wine he drinks or the cushions he reclines on. Objects don't require conversation. What happens next? I'm going to be direct with you, because sanitizing this serves no one but the powerful. He doesn't prepare you, doesn't ensure your comfort. The act is violent not because he's intentionally cruel, but because your pain is so irrelevant to him, it doesn't even register as a consideration. You are being used in the most literal sense of the word. You've been trained not to cry out, so you don't. You've been taught to perform pleasure, so you do. You face a mask while inside you're fragmenting into pieces you'll never fully put back together. The priests take notes. The officials watch with bored expressions, as if witnessing routine administrative business. The astrologers consult their charts, and you disappear, not physically but psychologically, retreating to some interior space where maybe this isn't really happening to the person you used to be. It ends. Eventually, everything ends. But you're not dismissed. Not yet. The king requires verification. A physician examines you in front of everyone, confirming the blood, documenting the evidence of your former virginity, like investigators cataloging a crime scene. Except no crime has been committed because you can't commit crimes against property, and that's all you've ever been. Now comes the cruelest part. If the king enjoyed you, if your performance was adequate, you're moved to the main harem. You'll join hundreds of other women waiting for him to summon you again. He might. Most likely, he won't. You'll spend the rest of your life in those same golden chambers, aging gracefully or desperately, entirely dependent on a man who's already forgotten your face. But if he didn't enjoy you, if some aspect of the experience displeased him, if the astrologers declare the union inauspicious, you're moved to the lower harem, the forgotten zone, where women who've failed their sacred duty are stored until they're useful again, usually as gifts to visiting dignitaries or rewards for loyal generals, or occasionally as sacrifices during religious festivals that require proven vessels of royal essence. You have no say in any of this. You never did. Some girls internalize the rhetoric completely. They convince themselves it was an honor, that they truly are blessed, that their suffering was sacred. It's a survival mechanism. Believing the pain had meaning is easier than facing the void of its meaninglessness. Others break. They're found dead in those beautiful bathing pools where they simply stop eating, fading away like flowers denied sunlight. The eunuchs remove their bodies with practiced efficiency and tell the younger girls they were called to serve the gods in heaven. And some, a dangerous few, remain aware. They remember who they were before the system tried to erase them. These women become the most closely watched because awareness without power breeds the only thing more dangerous than rebellion: truth-telling. But here's what makes this entire system especially insidious. It was considered righteous. The kings who perpetuated this weren't viewed as predators. They were celebrated as pious rulers maintaining divine order. The priests who blessed these unions weren't considered complicit. They were honored as spiritual authorities. The parents who surrendered their daughters weren't shamed. They were praised for their loyalty. Everyone was just following the system. And systems, by their nature, absolve individual responsibility. This is what makes historical abuse so much worse than individual acts of cruelty. One monster is an aberration, but a civilization that builds institutions around exploitation, that documents it, ritualizes it, makes it so normal that thousands of people participate without questioning, that's a collective moral failure on a scale that individual evil can never match. The Persian harems operated for centuries. Generation after generation of girls processed through these chambers, their suffering considered so unremarkable it barely warranted recording. We know about the king's military campaigns. We know about their architectural achievements. We know what they ate, how they dressed, which gods they worshipped. But the girls? They're almost invisible in the historical record. Nameless, interchangeable, relevant only when their bodies serve some function for powerful men. If this is making you uncomfortable, good. It should, because pretending this was somehow less horrific than it was insults every girl who suffered through it. Let me tell you about the prophecy clause, one of the most disturbing aspects that few people discuss. Persian kings often consulted oracles and dream interpreters who wielded enormous influence. If a prophet declared that the king needed to deflower a virgin under specific cosmic conditions to secure military victory, that became a religious mandate. Girls were sometimes selected not for beauty or status, but because they were born under particular stars, or because their birth village was mentioned in some ancient prophecy. These girls weren't chosen. They were cosmically drafted. Their bodies became battlegrounds for supernatural warfare they didn't believe in, couldn't understand, and certainly never consented to. And after the prophecy was fulfilled, after the king did whatever the oracle prescribed, these girls were often killed, not as punishment, but as completion of the ritual. Their deaths were framed as transcendence. They'd served their divine purpose and were now released to eternal glory. Murder dressed up as apotheosis. The punishment sellers I mentioned earlier deserve their own examination. When girls resisted, and some did, despite the impossible odds, they were taken below the palace to chambers designed specifically for breaking human spirits. They weren't just beaten. That would be too simple, too quick. They were subjected to sensory deprivation for weeks, left alone in perfect darkness and silence until their minds began to fracture. Then, just as they adapted, the torture would shift, constant noise, blinding light, no sleep, no rest, until they couldn't remember who they'd been before the pain. Some were displayed publicly within the harem as examples. Scarred, broken, living warnings to other girls about what happened when you forgot your place. And the most insidious detail, the other girls were forced to participate in these punishments, ordered to shun the disobedient one, to report any sympathetic words, to actively contribute to her destruction. This ensured that solidarity was impossible, that every girl saw every other girl as a potential threat, that the system sustained itself through forcing victims to victimize each other. Now, you might be thinking, this was ancient history. These were different times with different values. We can't judge them by modern standards. And to that, I say, watch me judge them, because human suffering isn't culturally relative. A girl crying in terror as she's dragged to a king's chamber felt the same fear, whether it was 500 BCE or today. Pain doesn't have an expiration date that makes it acceptable. Trauma doesn't become less traumatic just because it's historical. The reason we need to examine this isn't to feel superior to our ancestors. It's to recognize the patterns. Because while we've abolished formal harems and royal absolute power, we haven't abolished the fundamental dynamic. Powerful people creating systems that allow them to exploit vulnerable people while calling it something noble. We still see it. We've just gotten better at hiding it behind different languages. Modern trafficking operations use the same tactics. Isolate victims, control their reality, convince them this is somehow their choice or their duty, make solidarity impossible. Corporate exploitation uses similar mechanisms. Dress up labor abuse as company culture and family values. Political systems still concentrate power while insisting it's for the people's benefit. The window dressing changes. The psychology remains. Here's what we should learn from those Persian palace virgins. Systems of abuse require collective participation. It's never just one evil king. It's thousands of people doing their small part, convincing themselves their contribution doesn't really count. The eunuch who just guards the door. The servant who just prepares the bath. The priest who just blesses the union. The official who just records the event. The mother who just surrenders her daughter. The citizen who just looks away. Everyone is just doing something, and together they create hell. And recognition without action is just voyeurism. Don't just watch this video and feel disturbed. Ask yourself, what systems am I participating in right now without questioning? What modern equivalents am I enabling through silence or compliance? The girls in those Persian palaces are gone. We can't save them, but their echoes still exist in every modern system that treats human beings as resources to be managed rather than individuals to be respected. If you found this as disturbing as I did researching it, and you should subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to keep pulling back the curtain on history's darkest corners. The stories they don't teach, the truths that make us uncomfortable, the patterns we need to recognize before we can break them. The Persian kings are dead. Their palaces are ruins. Their empires have crumbled into dust. But the question remains, how many modern palaces are we still building? How many invisible chambers still exist where the powerful consume the powerless behind walls we've agreed not to see beyond? The girls in those ancient harems couldn't speak for themselves. They had no voice, no power, no choice. So we speak for them now. We remember. We bear witness. We refuse to let their suffering be invisible, even centuries later. Because if we forget how these systems operated, we forget how to recognize them when they resurface wearing new masks. That's the real horror. Not just what happened then, but what continues happening now in forms we've been trained not to name. Like this video, if it changed how you see power dynamics in history. Share it if you think others need to hear this story. And comment below, what modern parallels did this bring to mind for you? Let's have a conversation that actually matters. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and never accept that power justifies itself. The truth isn't always beautiful, but it's always necessary.